Alejandro navigated the bustling streets of Mexico City, his sleek black car gliding through the chaos of honking horns and vibrant street vendors. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the buildings, illuminating the city's rich culture and its stark contrasts. Alejandro, a successful businessman, was no stranger to the city's pulse, but today his thoughts were heavy. He had just left a meeting that had drained him emotionally, a weight on his shoulders that money could not lift. As he drove, he reflected on the relentless demands of his job and the emptiness that lingered in his heart since his son, Diego, had fallen ill. As he approached a busy intersection, something caught his eye. A small figure sat curled up against a wall, shivering against the cold concrete. Alejandro's heart sank as he recognized the girl. She couldn't have been more than 10. Her clothes were tattered and her thin frame was almost swallowed by the oversized sweater she wore. Alejandro's instinct was to drive past, to ignore the pang of empathy gnawing at him, but he couldn't. Something deep within him stirred, an urge to stop. He pulled over, parked the car and stepped out, the noise of the city fading slightly as he approached her. "Hola," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "Are you hungry?" Valentina looked up, her wide eyes filled with skepticism and fear. She had learned to be wary of strangers, especially men in suits. The cold wind tousled her hair, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she pulled her knees closer to her chest, as if trying to disappear into herself. Alejandro noted the dirt smudged on her cheeks and the way her lip trembled, revealing a fragility that tugged at his heart. "I'm fine," Valentina replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She instinctively recoiled, her body language screaming distrust. "You don't have to be afraid," Alejandro reassured her, his voice softening. "I just want to help. Please, let me share some food with you." After a moment's hesitation, Valentina's stomach grumbled audibly, betraying her brave facade. Alejandro chuckled lightly, trying to ease the tension. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in paper. "Here," he offered, extending it towards her. "I promise it's not poisoned." Valentina eyed the sandwich suspiciously, her instincts screaming to refuse, but the hunger pangs were relentless. With a tentative hand, she took the sandwich, her fingers brushing against his. Alejandro's heart ached as he witnessed her internal struggle, the remnants of a life shaped by hardship evident in her every move. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a small bite, her eyes darting around as if expecting trouble. Alejandro took a seat beside her on the cold ground, ignoring the dirt on his expensive suit. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Valentina," she replied after a moment, her voice gaining a hint of strength. "Valentina," he repeated, savoring the name. "That's beautiful. How long have you been out here?" Valentina paused, chewing slowly, as if the question was a heavy one. "I don't remember," she admitted, her voice barely a murmur. "A long time." Alejandro's heart ached for her. "Do you have a family?" he probed gently. Valentina shook her head, her eyes welling with unshed tears. "No, they left me." The words tumbled out, and for a moment Alejandro saw the ghost of a child she might have been before the world had hardened her. A silence enveloped them, heavy with unspoken pain. Alejandro felt an overwhelming urge to protect her, to offer her a chance at something more than this life of despair. "Listen, Valentina," he said carefully, "I have a son. He's sick, and I need someone to help take care of him. Would you consider coming to work for me?" Valentina's gaze snapped to his, a mix of confusion and suspicion crossing her face. "Why would you want me?" "Because I can see you're strong, and my son needs someone caring. I can pay you well, and you won't have to live on the streets anymore. You'd have a home, food, and safety." The offer hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Valentina hesitated, her mind racing. She had learned to be cautious, and yet the thought of a warm bed and regular meals was intoxicating. "What's wrong with your son?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "He has been sick for a long time," Alejandro replied, his voice laced with sorrow. "I can't do it alone. I'm afraid for him." Valentina felt a pang of sympathy for this stranger, for the pain etched on his face. "How sick?" she pressed, her own experiences giving her a depth of understanding that transcended her years. Alejandro took a deep breath, the weight of his son's condition heavy on his heart. "He has a rare illness that requires constant care. I've tried everything to help him, but—" His voice trailed off, and Valentina saw the vulnerability in his eyes. "Okay," she said finally, surprising herself. "I'll help you." Alejandro's heart soared at her response, relief flooding through him. "Are you sure? You don't have to—" "I want to," she interrupted, her voice steadier now. "I want to try." As they made their way back to the car, Alejandro felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. Valentina, though fragile, had a spirit that shone through her hardships. He opened the passenger door for her, and as she climbed in, he couldn't help but wonder about the path that had led her to this moment. "Thank you, Valentina," he said sincerely, pulling into the flow of traffic once more. "You don't know how much this means to me." Valentina stared out the window, the city blurring past her. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Could this really be the beginning of something new? As the car merged back into the bustling streets of Mexico City, she couldn't help but glance at Alejandro, the man who had offered her a lifeline amidst her struggles. "Do you have any questions?" Alejandro asked, breaking the silence. "Will your son like me?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I think he will," Alejandro replied, a soft smile curling his lips. "He's a good boy, full of life, and he loves meeting new people." Valentina nodded, but remained quiet, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. She was stepping into a world she knew little about, one filled with possibilities, but also uncertainties. As they drove on, the weight of her past lingered in the back of her mind, a reminder of the struggles she had faced. "Just one more thing," Alejandro said, glancing at her. "You can trust me. I promise I only want to help." Valentina met his gaze, searching for any hint of deception, but all she saw was sincerity. "I will try," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good," Alejandro replied, his tone warm. "That's all I ask." As they drove deeper into the city, Valentina could feel the promise of a new beginning unfolding before her. Little did she know, the journey ahead would challenge both their lives in ways they had never anticipated. In that moment, hope flickered in her heart, a fragile flame ready to ignite her future. Valentina stood at the threshold of Alejandro's luxurious home, her heart racing as she took in the grandeur that surrounded her. The marble floors glistened under the warm glow of the ornate chandeliers, and the walls were adorned with stunning artwork. Yet, despite the beauty of her new environment, she felt an overwhelming sense of displacement. The opulence of the mansion was a stark contrast to the cramped, cold alleyways she had called home. "Alejandro, I don't think I belong here," she whispered, almost to herself as he walked ahead, showing her around. "Nonsense," he replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "You're here to care for Diego. That's what matters most." As they entered Diego's room, Valentina was immediately struck by the sight of the boy. He was propped up on a mountain of pillows, his cheeks flushed with a hint of color, despite the pallor that his illness had cast over him. His bright eyes sparkled with curiosity as they landed on Valentina. "Are you my new nurse?" Diego asked, his voice soft but laced with excitement. "Yes, I am," Valentina replied, kneeling beside his bed. "My name is Valentina. I'm here to help you." Diego grinned, revealing a dimple on his cheek. "I've never had a nurse before. What do nurses do?" "They take care of you, make sure you're comfortable and help you feel better," Valentina explained, her heart warming at his innocent enthusiasm. "Great! Then you can help me with my video games," Diego exclaimed, eager to shift the focus from his illness. Valentina chuckled, feeling a bond forming between them. "Of course. But first, let's check your medicine and make sure you're feeling okay." As Valentina began to organize Diego's medication, she noticed the way Alejandro hovered near the door, watching them with an expression that was a mix of hope and exhaustion. She recognized the pain etched in his features, the heaviness of a father's heart burdened by the weight of his son's condition. "Diego, do you have a favorite game?" she asked, hoping to lift the mood further. "Oh yes, it's called Hero Adventures. I'm really good at it," Diego beamed. Valentina smiled as he animatedly described the game, his face lighting up with passion. She loved the way he spoke, filled with life and imagination, despite the challenges he faced. As the days turned into weeks, Valentina settled into her role as Diego's nurse. She learned to navigate the intricacies of his care, attending to his needs with diligence and compassion. Each day, she found herself becoming more attached to the boy, who seemed to thrive under her attention. They shared laughter, stories, and dreams, and Valentina felt a warmth she had long been missing. One evening, as they sat together reading his favorite storybook, Diego suddenly turned serious. "Valentina, do you think I'll always be sick?" Valentina's heart ached at the question, knowing all too well the uncertainty that loomed over them. "I think you're a strong boy, Diego, and with the right care, we'll do our best to help you feel better. But remember, it's okay to be scared. You're not alone in this." Diego nodded, taking her hand in his small, fragile one. "Will you always be here?" Valentina hesitated for a moment, her heart tightening at the thought of leaving him. "As long as you need me, I'll be here. You're like family to me now." Just then, Alejandro entered the room with a tray of snacks. "What are you two talking about?" he asked, a smile crossing his face as he saw their interaction. "Valentina says I'm like family," Diego exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with joy. Alejandro's smile faltered for just a moment as he looked at Valentina, his expression shifting to one of vulnerability. "Family is important," he said softly, setting the tray down. "And I'm grateful that you're here for Diego." As the days passed, Alejandro began to confide in Valentina more about his struggles as a single parent. One evening, after Diego had fallen asleep, Alejandro found Valentina in the kitchen preparing a late-night snack. He leaned against the counter, his posture weary. "You know, Valentina," he began, his voice low, "I never thought I'd be in this position. I always worked so hard to provide for my family, and then everything changed." Valentina looked up, her heart aching for him. "You're doing your best, Alejandro. Diego is lucky to have you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "But I feel guilty all the time. I'm not able to save him from this illness. I feel like I'm failing him as a father." Valentina stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "You're not failing him. You're doing everything you can. Sometimes love and support are the most powerful medicines." Alejandro looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and pain. "How did you become so wise at such a young age?" "I've had my share of struggles," Valentina replied, her voice soft. "But I've learned that we can't carry our burdens alone. It's okay to lean on others." He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I wish I could be as strong as you." "You are strong, Alejandro. You just don't see it," she encouraged, her gaze steady. You're here for Diego, and that speaks volumes about your character." Their conversation lingered in the air as Alejandro found solace in her presence. He felt a connection growing between them, a bond forged through shared struggles and compassion. One afternoon, while tidying up Diego's room, Valentina stumbled upon a small, dusty box tucked away in the corner of the closet. Curiosity piqued, she opened it carefully, revealing a collection of old letters tied together with a fraying ribbon. As she began to read, her heart sank with each word. They were letters from Alejandro's late wife, filled with love and hopes for their future as a family. Tears pricked at Valentina's eyes as she realized the depth of Alejandro's loss. Each letter spoke of dreams that had crumbled, of a life that had been taken too soon. The pain etched in the words revealed a man who was not just wealthy, but profoundly wounded. "Valentina?" Alejandro's voice broke her reverie, and she quickly closed the box, her heart racing. "Sorry, I was just—" she stammered, unsure of how to explain. He stepped closer, concern etched on his face. "What were you looking at?" "Nothing, just organizing," she lied, feeling guilty for intruding on his past. But Alejandro's gaze lingered on the box, and Valentina could see the flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Those letters—" "I'm sorry, Alejandro, I didn't mean to pry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He sighed deeply, running a hand across his face. "It's okay. They're part of my past, part of who I am. I haven't been able to bring myself to read them in years." Valentina's heart ached for him. "You still carry her with you, don't you?" Alejandro nodded, his expression distant. "Every day. It's a weight I bear, but it's also a reminder of what I've lost." In that moment, Valentina understood the depth of Alejandro's struggle. He was not just a wealthy man with a dying son, he was a father grieving for the love he had lost, trying to navigate the complexities of life on his own. She felt a surge of empathy for him, and an unspoken bond formed between them, a connection rooted in shared pain and understanding. "I'm here for you, Alejandro," Valentina said softly. "If you ever want to talk about her or anything at all, I'm here." He looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Thank you, Valentina. That means more than you know." As they stood together in the dim light of Diego's room, Valentina felt a shift in their relationship. They were no longer just employer and employee. They were two wounded souls navigating the complexities of love and loss, seeking solace in each other's presence. Valentina stood beside Diego's bed, her heart swelling with hope and determination. The small room was filled with soft light filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow on Diego's pale face. He was a fragile creature, but his spirit shone brightly whenever Valentina entered the room. She had quickly become his confidant and caretaker, and in those moments she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. "Valentina," Diego said, breaking the silence, "do you think I'll get better?" His voice was a whisper, laced with the innocence of a child who had faced more than his share of adversity. Valentina knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair away from his forehead, her heart aching at the sight of his frail body. "I believe you will, Diego. You are so strong," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "And I have some ideas that might help you even more." Diego's eyes widened with curiosity. "What do you mean?" Valentina took a deep breath, her mind racing with the unconventional treatments she had read about, therapies that combined traditional medicine with holistic approaches. "I've been researching some new therapies, things that focus on nutrition and alternative treatments. Maybe we can talk to your dad about them." Diego's brow furrowed. "But will he let me? Sometimes he gets really worried and doesn't want to try anything different." I think if we present it in a good way, he might be open to it. You know how much he cares about you, she said, trying to instill confidence in the boy. Let's gather some information and present it together. It might make him feel better to know we're trying everything possible. Diego smiled, a glimmer of excitement illuminating his features. Okay, let's do it. I want to show him I'm fighting. As Valentina helped Diego with his physical therapy exercises, she felt a surge of warmth fill the room. He was not just her patient. He was the light that had brightened her own dark past. She had come to care for him deeply, and the thought of him getting better filled her with a renewed sense of hope. Later that day, as the afternoon sun dipped low in the sky, Valentina sought out Alejandro. She found him in his study, papers strewn across the mahogany desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Valentina, what is it?" he asked, his voice a mix of concern and curiosity. "I wanted to talk to you about Diego's treatment," she began, her heart racing. "I've been researching some unconventional methods that could help him. I think it might be worth exploring." Alejandro leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from surprise to skepticism. "Unconventional methods? What do you mean?" Valentina felt her resolve waver as she saw the tension in his shoulders. "There are holistic therapies that focus on nutrition and emotional well-being. They've shown promise for children with conditions like his. I know it's different, but I believe it could work alongside his current treatments." "I'm not sure, Valentina," Alejandro replied, shaking his head slowly. "We've been through so much already. I don't want to introduce anything that could jeopardize his health." "Please," she urged, her voice rising slightly in desperation. "I understand your hesitation, but Diego deserves every chance we can give him. He's strong and he wants to fight. We can research this together and find out what's safe." Alejandro considered her words, the internal battle evident on his face. Valentina stepped closer, feeling the warmth radiating from him, a mix of authority and vulnerability. "I promise, I'll do everything I can to ensure it's safe. We can even consult with his doctor. Just give me a chance to show you." After a long pause, Alejandro finally nodded. "All right, let's look into it, but only if we can keep his doctor informed. I won't risk his health." Relief washed over Valentina, and she couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Alejandro. You won't regret this. I believe it could really help him." As they began to research together, Valentina noticed a shift in their dynamic. Collaborating on Diego's care forged a bond between them that was unexpectedly deep. They spent long hours discussing treatments, sharing anecdotes from their lives, and slowly unraveling the layers that had kept them apart. One evening, as they reviewed research articles in the living room, the atmosphere was relaxed and laughter filled the air. "Did you really think that would work?" Alejandro chuckled, recalling a particularly misguided treatment suggestion Valentina had read about. Valentina laughed, her cheeks flushed with amusement. "Hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, but I promise I've done my homework on the good ones." He smiled at her, and for a moment they shared a connection that felt almost familial. Yet, in the back of her mind, doubts began to creep in. Was she crossing a line? Could she ever truly belong in this world with Alejandro and Diego? As the days turned into weeks, Valentina's feelings for Alejandro grew stronger, complicated by the reality of their circumstances. She admired his dedication to Diego, the way he never wavered in his love for his son. But she also felt the weight of her own past hanging over her, a constant reminder of where she came from and who she was. "Valentina," Alejandro said one evening as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights, "you've become such an important part of our lives. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for Diego." Her heart fluttered at his words, and she found herself searching for the right response. "I'm just doing what anyone would do. Diego deserves all the love and support he can get." "No, it's more than that," Alejandro insisted, his gaze steady on her. "You've brought hope back into our lives. I don't know what I would do without you." Valentina felt a warmth spread through her at his praise, but the shadow of her doubts lingered. "I just hope I'm enough for you both," she admitted softly, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Alejandro turned to face her, his expression serious. "You are more than enough. You've filled a void that I didn't even realize was there. You have a place in this family." The weight of his words settled over her, a mixture of warmth and fear. Could she truly belong in a family like his? Just as she was about to respond, a muffled sound from inside the house interrupted them. "What was that?" Alejandro asked, standing up abruptly. Valentina's heart raced as she followed him inside, where they found Diego sitting in bed, tears streaming down his face. "What's wrong, mijo?" Alejandro rushed to his side, concern etched on his features. "I had a bad dream," Diego sniffled, his small body trembling. "I thought I was losing you both." Valentina's heart broke at the sight of the frightened boy. She knelt by the bed, taking his hand in hers. "You're not going to lose us, Diego. We're here for you, always." Diego looked from Valentina to Alejandro, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "Promise?" "Promise," Alejandro said firmly, his voice soothing. "We're a team, remember? You, me, and Valentina. We'll face everything together." As they sat with Diego, Valentina felt a sense of belonging wash over her. In that moment, surrounded by love and vulnerability, she realized that her fears of inadequacy were unfounded. She was part of something beautiful, something worth fighting for. However, as the evening wore on, Valentina couldn't shake the feeling that beneath the surface of their new family dynamic, shadows loomed, shadows that whispered of secrets and struggles yet to be revealed. And as she glanced at Alejandro, she couldn't help but wonder what burdens he carried, hidden beneath the facade of a devoted father. Valentina stood in the grand living room of Alejandro's home, her heart racing as she contemplated the enormity of the task she had just proposed. The opulent chandelier above her sparkled in the soft lighting, casting a warm glow over the plush furnishings that surrounded her. Despite the luxury that enveloped her, Valentina felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The thought of organizing a charity event to raise funds for Diego's treatment sparked a flicker of hope within her. "Alejandro," she began, her voice steady but infused with a hint of nervousness, "I truly believe that hosting a charity event could make a significant difference in raising the funds we need for Diego's treatment. We could invite local businesses, friends, and anyone who might want to help." Alejandro leaned back against the leather couch, his expression contemplative. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture Valentina had come to recognize as a sign of deep thought. "You really think it would work? I mean, it's a big undertaking, Valentina. What do you know about organizing events?" Valentina felt a surge of determination. "I may not have experience, but I've learned a lot from watching people. I understand what moves them, what motivates them to give. And right now, we have a cause that's worth fighting for. Diego." She paused, gauging Alejandro's reaction. "I can reach out to some local vendors and see if they'd be willing to donate food, drinks, or auction items. We could even have a small performance to entertain the guests. It could be a beautiful evening to inspire generosity." Alejandro's brow furrowed, and he seemed to be weighing her words carefully. "You're really passionate about this, aren't you?" he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Diego deserves a chance," Valentina replied earnestly, her eyes locking onto Alejandro's. "And if we can gather support from the community, we might just find the help we need." After a long moment of silence, Alejandro nodded slowly, a smile breaking through his previously serious demeanor. "Okay, let's do it. I'll support you in any way I can." Valentina beamed at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Alejandro. I promise I'll do my best to make it a success." As the days passed, Valentina poured her energy into planning the charity event. She spent hours on the phone, coordinating with local businesses, securing donations, and crafting invitations. Alejandro, impressed by her relentless enthusiasm and organizational skills, offered his assistance whenever he could, but he often found himself in awe of her ability to connect with people. One evening, as they were finalizing the details, Alejandro remarked, "I never expected you to be so resourceful. You've really brought a new light into this house, Valentina." She blushed at his compliment, feeling a warmth spread through her. It's easy to be motivated when there's so much at stake. Diego is like family to me now. The night of the charity event arrived, and the atmosphere in Alejandro's home was electric. The living room had been transformed into a vibrant space, adorned with twinkling lights and colorful decorations that Valentina had meticulously arranged. A small stage had been set up for local artists to perform, and the scent of delicious food wafted through the air. Guests began to arrive, and Valentina greeted each one with a bright smile, her heart racing with excitement. She felt a sense of purpose as she introduced herself and explained the cause. Many of the attendees expressed their admiration for Diego, sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs, which only fueled Valentina's determination to make the evening a success. Alejandro, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, moved through the crowd with a sense of pride. He watched as Valentina engaged with the guests, her natural charisma shining through. Each time she spoke about Diego and their mission to raise funds for his treatment, Alejandro felt a swell of admiration for her. She had stepped into their lives and become a beacon of hope. "Valentina!" Alejandro called out, making his way toward her during a brief lull in the festivities. "You're doing an incredible job tonight. Look at how engaged everyone is with your message." "Thank you, Alejandro," she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I think people are genuinely touched by Diego's story. It's all about connecting with them on a human level." As the evening progressed, Valentina took to the stage, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed what she would say countless times, but standing in front of the crowd felt entirely different. She cleared her throat and began, her voice steady and clear. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, glancing at Alejandro, who stood at the edge of the stage, pride radiating from him. "We are gathered here for a very special cause, to support a courageous young boy named Diego, who is fighting against a rare illness. Every contribution you make tonight will go directly toward his treatment, giving him a chance at a brighter future." The room erupted in applause, and Valentina felt a rush of warmth. She continued, sharing snippets of Diego's story and the bond they had formed. As she spoke, she could see emotions flickering across the faces in the audience, compassion, empathy, and a desire to help. After her speech, the auction commenced, and Valentina felt a sense of exhilaration as items were bid on and sold. Laughter and chatter filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she truly belonged. It wasn't just about the money, it was about bringing people together for a common cause. As the night drew to a close, Valentina stood alongside Alejandro, watching as the last guests filtered out of the house. The event had been a resounding success, raising more funds than they could have hoped for. "I can't believe we did it!" Valentina exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. "Look at all the support we received." Alejandro smiled, his gaze warm. "You were the heart of this event, Valentina. I'm so grateful for your hard work. Diego is lucky to have you in his life." Honestly, I'm the lucky one, she replied, feeling a rush of emotion. I've never felt so accepted before. It feels like we're really making a difference. Just then, a well-dressed man approached them, his demeanor exuding confidence and charm. He introduced himself as Eduardo, a prominent donor known for his philanthropic endeavors. I just wanted to congratulate you both on a fantastic event, he said, his eyes glinting with interest as he turned to Valentina. You were remarkable tonight. Your passion is contagious. Thank you, Valentina said, feeling a mix of pride and apprehension under his gaze. There was something about Eduardo that made her uneasy, a sense of ulterior motive lurking beneath his polished exterior. I'm particularly interested in Diego's treatment, Eduardo continued, his voice smooth. I believe I can help. Perhaps we could discuss some potential investment opportunities. Valentina exchanged a glance with Alejandro, who appeared tense. We appreciate your interest, Eduardo, Alejandro said carefully, but we're still exploring our options. Of course, Eduardo replied, his smile unwavering. I just want to ensure that Diego gets the best care possible. After all, it would be a shame for such a talented young boy to miss out on life's opportunities. As he spoke, Valentina felt an unsettling sensation creep over her. She sensed that Eduardo's intentions were more complex than he let on, a feeling that left her on edge. She wanted to protect Diego, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this donor might not have purely altruistic motives. With the event winding down, Valentina excused herself for a moment, needing space to collect her thoughts. She stepped outside, the cool night air refreshing against her flushed skin. She gazed up at the stars, feeling lost in the whirlwind of emotions that had flooded her heart. She was grateful for the success of the charity event, but the encounter with Eduardo lingered in her mind, casting a shadow over her joy. What did he truly want? And could she trust him? Just then, Alejandro joined her outside, his expression matching her contemplative mood. Are you all right? He asked, concern etched across his features. I'm just thinking about everything, Valentina admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The event was amazing, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right with Eduardo. He seemed too eager, too interested in Diego. Alejandro's brow furrowed, his jaw tightening. I noticed it too. It's unsettling, isn't it? We need to be cautious. Diego's well-being comes first, and I won't let anyone jeopardize that. Exactly, Valentina agreed, her heart racing. He may seem generous, but we need to ensure his intentions are genuine. I'll keep my guard up. As they stood together under the blanket of stars, the weight of their shared concern settled between them. They both knew that challenges lay ahead, but Valentina felt a renewed sense of strength, bolstered by Alejandro's unwavering commitment to protect Diego at all costs. The bond they shared was growing deeper, and as they faced the uncertainties of the future, Valentina realized that their paths were intertwined in ways she had yet to fully understand. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over Alejandro's opulent home, Valentina felt a growing sense of unease. The charity event had been a resounding success, yet something about the wealthy donor who had approached her unsettled her. He had been too interested, too probing, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his intentions than mere philanthropy. Sitting on the edge of Diego's bed while he played with his toy cars, Valentina's mind raced. She was grateful for the way Alejandro had opened his home and his heart to her, but now she found herself questioning everything. The whispers of Alejandro's past, the shadows that danced just out of reach, began to thrum in her mind like a haunting melody. Valentina! Diego's small voice interrupted her thoughts. He looked up at her, his big brown eyes filled with innocent concern. Are you okay? You look like you're thinking too much." She forced a smile, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "Just a little tired, Diego. It was a big day, wasn't it?" "Yeah," he exclaimed, grinning. "You were awesome. Everyone loved you. Can we do it again?" Valentina's heart softened at his enthusiasm. "Maybe one day, but for now, let's just enjoy some quiet time together." As they settled into a peaceful silence, Valentina's thoughts drifted back to the donor. She had overheard snippets of conversation that hinted at a rivalry between Alejandro and this man, and it left her feeling exposed. Just as she was about to voice her concerns to Alejandro, he entered the room, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and gratitude. "Hey, Valentina," he said, his voice warm but tinged with weariness. "I can't thank you enough for what you did today. You really brought the event to life." "Thank you, Alejandro. I just did what felt right," she replied, trying to mask her apprehension. "Diego is special, and I want to help however I can." He knelt beside Diego, tousling his hair. "You've been a blessing to us both," he said before turning his attention back to Valentina. "But I also need to talk to you about something." Valentina's heart raced. Did he sense her unease? "What is it?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "I was thinking about the donor who spoke with you at the event. I'd like to explore his offer, but I want your honest opinion." His gaze pierced through her, searching for her true feelings. She hesitated, knowing that her words could alter the fragile relationship they had built. I think we should be cautious." He seemed too interested in Diego, and I couldn't help but feel there's something more there. Alejandro frowned, running a hand through his hair. "You're worried about what he might want?" "Yes," Valentina replied, her voice firming. "He might have his own agenda. I can't shake the feeling that there's a connection between you two, and it makes me uneasy." A tension filled the room, the air thick with unspoken truths. Alejandro's expression hardened, and Valentina could sense his frustration. "I know my past has its shadows, but I promise you, everything I do is for Diego. I would never put him in harm's way." "But what if your past catches up with you?" Valentina pressed, feeling a surge of protectiveness for Diego. "We both know how complicated life can be. What if this donor has a vendetta?" "Valentina," Alejandro snapped, his voice rising. "You don't understand. This isn't just about me, it's about Diego's future. I need to explore every option available to save him." The words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. Valentina felt her own frustration boil over. "And what about my feelings, Alejandro? I've sacrificed so much to be here, to care for Diego, and I'm not sure what role I play in all of this. Am I just a tool in your plan?" Silence enveloped them, the weight of their confrontation settling in. Diego, sensing the tension, looked between them, his small brow furrowed in confusion. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Valentina knelt down to his level, forcing a smile despite her turmoil. "Of course, sweetheart. Just a little disagreement between friends." "Friends?" Alejandro echoed, his tone softening as he glanced at Diego. "Yes, that's what we are. Valentina, I didn't mean to raise my voice. I'm just scared." "Scared?" Valentina replied, her heart aching at the vulnerability in his words. "We're all scared, Alejandro, but we can't let fear cloud our judgment." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "You're right. I've been so focused on saving Diego that I didn't consider how this affects you. I'm sorry. Just promise me you'll be careful," she insisted, her voice gentle. "I want to help, but I also need to know I can trust you." "I promise," he said, his eyes sincere. "I will do everything I can to protect both of you." As they shared a moment of understanding, Valentina's heart softened. But deep down, the doubt still lingered. She needed to know more about Alejandro's past, to understand the man she was beginning to care for. Later that evening, as Valentina began to pack her few belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. She had come to love Diego like a brother, and the thought of leaving him behind sent a sharp pang through her heart. Just as she zipped up her bag, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Valentina!" Diego's voice was small and timid. She opened the door, surprised to find him standing there, his face etched with worry. "What is it, Diego?" "Are you leaving?" he asked, his voice quaking. "Please don't go. I don't want you to leave." Valentina knelt down to his level, her heart breaking at the sight of his trembling lip. "Why would you think that, sweet boy?" "Because you look sad," he replied, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "And I heard you talking to my dad. Are you mad at him?" "No, I'm not mad," she reassured him gently. "Sometimes adults just have disagreements. It doesn't mean I don't love you." "Please, don't leave," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I need you. You're my best friend." Tears welled in Valentina's eyes as she gathered him into her arms, holding him tightly. "Oh, Diego, you're my best friend too. I promise I'm not going anywhere. I just need some time to think." "Okay," he said, sniffling. "But promise me you'll stay." "I promise," she whispered, her heart swelling with love for the boy who had captured her heart so completely. As they stood there, enveloped in each other's warmth, Valentina realized that her life was now intertwined with Alejandro and Diego in ways she had never expected. She might have come into their lives as a nurse, but she had found a family, and no matter the challenges ahead, she was determined to face them together. Valentina woke with the first light of dawn filtering through the heavy curtains of Diego's room. She stretched and rubbed her eyes, her heart still heavy with the thoughts from the night before. After the argument with Alejandro, she felt a tumult of emotions swirling inside her, a blend of confusion, fear, and an undeniable concern for Diego. As she stepped out of bed, her feet brushed against the cool wooden floor, grounding her momentarily. She needed to collect her thoughts and find a way to mend the rift that had opened between her and Alejandro. After a quick breakfast, she decided to explore the house a little more. She had spent so much time in Diego's room, caring for him, that she hadn't fully taken in the lavishness of her surroundings. Each room she passed felt like a portal into a different world, adorned with exquisite art pieces and furniture that echoed wealth and privilege. Yet there was one room that had always intrigued her, Alejandro's study, a place she had yet to enter. Pushing open the door, she was greeted by the scent of aged wood and leather. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with volumes that spoke of history, business, and philosophy. In the center stood a large mahogany desk, papers scattered across its surface. Her eyes caught sight of a small, leather-bound journal tucked beneath a stack of documents. Curiosity piqued, she reached for it and carefully opened it, her heart racing as she flipped through the pages. The journal belonged to Diego. His handwriting, though still a bit shaky, was filled with childish wonder and deep reflections. As she read, her heart ached at the innocent dreams of a boy who longed to be free of his illness. But it was the last entries that caught her breath, a stark contrast to the light-heartedness of the earlier ones. One entry in particular made her stomach turn. "I wish I could be like other kids. Dad has secrets that make him sad. I don't want to know them, but I feel them. I want to help him, but I'm scared." Valentina felt a chill run down her spine. What secrets could Alejandro be hiding that would burden his young son? She flipped through a few more pages, her heart heavy with each revelation. Diego had written about his fears of dying, of leaving his father alone with whatever pain lay beneath the surface. The last entry was particularly troubling. Sometimes I think my sickness is because of something bad in our family. I don't know what it is, but I promise to be brave, no matter what." The weight of those words pressed down on Valentina as she closed the journal, her mind swirling with questions. She felt a surge of anger toward Alejandro for keeping such profound truths from Diego, but she also understood the instinct to protect. She thought of how she had felt betrayed by Alejandro, but realized that perhaps he was acting out of love. Determined to confront him, Valentina steeled herself and left the study, making her way to Alejandro's office. She found him hunched over his laptop, his fingers moving swiftly over the keys, but he looked up as she entered. His expression shifted from concentration to surprise and then to concern. "Valentina," he said, closing his laptop. "Is everything all right?" "No, Alejandro, we need to talk," she replied, her voice steady but her heart racing. "I found Diego's journal." He paled slightly, his eyes narrowing, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. "What did you find?" "I found out that Diego knows something is wrong, something about your past and your family's history. He's scared, Alejandro. He thinks his illness might be connected to whatever you're hiding from him." Alejandro stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You shouldn't have read that," he said, his voice rising just above a whisper, a mixture of anger and desperation in his eyes. "I had to know, Alejandro. He deserves to understand what he's going through. You can't protect him from everything, especially the truth." A tense silence fell between them, thick with unspoken words. Alejandro pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture she recognized as frustration. "I thought I was doing what was best for him," he finally said, his voice low and weary. "I've tried to shield him from my mistakes, from the darkness that follows my family." "Then you need to talk to him," Valentina urged, stepping closer. "He loves you, and he needs to understand how to fight this illness. Hiding the truth only makes it worse." Alejandro looked torn, his brow furrowed in thought. "You don't know what you're asking of me," he muttered, his gaze dropping to the floor. "This family legacy, it's not just about Diego's health. It's about our entire history, things I wish I could erase." "Then let's face it together," Valentina urged. "You don't have to go through this alone. I care about Diego, and I care about you." Just as Alejandro opened his mouth to respond, a sudden alarm shattered the moment. The sound of beeping echoed through the house, and both their hearts dropped. It was the monitor in Diego's room, an alarm indicating distress. Without a word, they sprinted down the hall, fear propelling them forward. Valentina reached the door first, flinging it open to find Diego thrashing in bed, his face pale and beaded with sweat. The monitor blared, and the numbers displayed a rapid decline in his heart rate. "Diego!" Valentina shouted, rushing to his side. She could see panic in Alejandro's eyes as he grabbed a phone to call for help. "Stay with me, buddy," Valentina urged, grasping Diego's hand tightly. "You're going to be all right. Just breathe with me, okay?" Diego's eyes fluttered open, but they were clouded with fear. "Valentina, I'm scared," he murmured, his voice weak. "I know, but you're the bravest boy I know. Just hold on. Help is coming," she said, forcing a smile through her own terror. As Alejandro spoke hurriedly on the phone, Valentina could see his emotions playing across his face. Fear, guilt, and a desperate hope that everything would be all right. She turned her attention back to Diego, trying to keep him grounded. "Can you tell me about your favorite dragon, Diego?" she asked, remembering how they had spent afternoons drawing fantastical creatures together. "What color is it?" "Blue," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "with golden wings." "Right. And what does it do?" she pressed, willing him to focus on the story instead of the chaos around them. It protects the kingdom," he replied, his breathing shallow but steadying a bit at her encouragement. "Exactly. And you're the prince, remember? You have to be strong for your kingdom," Valentina said, squeezing his hand tighter. As the sound of sirens approached in the distance, Valentina felt a surge of urgency, but something else stirred within her, a realization of the depth of her feelings for this small family. This moment was more than just about caring for a sick boy. It was about love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds they were forming. Alejandro hung up the phone, his eyes wide with concern. "They're on their way," he said, stepping closer to Diego's bed. "I'm here, Diego. You're not alone." The two of them shared a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. They were both terrified, but they were also united in their determination to protect Diego at all costs. Just then, Valentina's phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her attention momentarily away from the scene unfolding. She glanced at the screen and saw a message that made her heart skip a beat. "Meet me. I know the truth about Alejandro's family. It's time you learned. Ah." Valentina's breath caught in her throat, the implications of the message swirling in her mind. She had thought the chaos of the moment was overwhelming, but now she faced another storm brewing on the horizon, one that could unravel everything she thought she knew about Alejandro and the life they had begun to build together. As the sirens grew louder, Valentina tucked the phone back into her pocket, choosing to focus on Diego. Whatever secrets lay in Alejandro's past would have to wait. Right now, her priority was to keep the boy she had grown to love safe. And as she stood there, hand in hand with Diego and Alejandro, she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together.